Okay, so we've got this pretty intense stack of historical stuff to go through.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. It's a kind of a deep dive into a really, really dark side of U.S. history.
Absolutely.
You know, when we think about science and culture, it's
Right.
not all, progress and invention.
Right.
There are some really troubling things that happened.
Absolutely.
And I think especially given that you're so interested in the ethics of history and research, this is going to be quite a journey.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really important for people to understand how these things happen so you don't repeat them.
Yeah. So where should we even begin? I mean, there's so much here.
Well, I mean, we could start with something that really captures the attention.
Okay.
Something with a real aha moment for the listener.
Like what?
Like the Tuskegee syphilis study.
Oh, man.
That went on for 40 years.
40 years. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, from 1932 to 1972.
Wow.
They observed hundreds of black men who had syphilis.
And they didn't even tell them, right?
No, they weren't fully informed about what was going on.
And they didn't give them treatment.
Not even after penicillin became available in the 1940s.
Oh, my God. So they knew there was a cure.
Yeah.
And they just let these men suffer.
The idea was to study the natural progression of the disease.
But how could they justify that?
Well, it was a different time.
Yeah.
Societal attitudes towards race and medical ethics were very different.
Still, it's just horrifying.
It is.
And it makes you wonder, about the priorities back then.
Whose well-being was really being considered in scientific research?
Right. And it's not an isolated incident, is it? I mean,
Well, unfortunately not.
there's the case of Dr. J. Marion Sims.
Oh, yes.
In the 1840s,
Right.
performing these gynecological surgeries on enslaved women.
Without anesthesia.
Without anesthesia. I mean, the pain must have been excruciating.
And the justification at the time was that black people didn't feel pain the same way.
Oh, my God. That's just...
A deeply racist belief.
Absolutely.
And it shaped medical practice.
For how long?
For far too long.
And what about Sims? I mean, was he ever held accountable?
Well, he was initially celebrated for his contributions.
Of course he was.
But in recent years, there's been a reevaluation of his legacy,
Rightfully so.
focusing on the lack of consent
Yeah.
and the suffering that these women endured.
This theme of people not having control over their own bodies.
It comes up again and again.
Yeah, like with Henrietta Lacks.
Oh, absolutely.
1951, right.
Right?
They took her cells
Her cervical cancer cell,
without her consent.
and they became the HeLa cell line.
The one that's been used for, like, everything.
Yeah, countless medical breakthroughs.
The polio vaccine, COVID-19 research.
But her family didn't know.
For years.
For decades.
And they never saw any of the financial benefits.
Not for a very long time.
It's
It
mind-boggling.
raises all these questions about ownership
Right.
of biological material.
Yeah.
Who benefits? Who gets to decide?
And then there's all this stuff from the Cold War.
The Cold War was a particularly dark time for ethical research.
Yeah, we see these stories about patients injected with radioactive materials.
Plutonium injections.
Wow, plutonium. That's crazy dangerous.
It is. They were trying to understand the effects of radiation on the human body.
But they didn't tell the people what they were doing.
In many cases, no.
There was one case I read about where a guy got like 446 times the average lifetime exposure.
Albert Stevens.
Yeah, Albert Stevens. I mean, what happened to him?
He did develop some health problems later in life.
I bet he did. And it wasn't just adults, right?
No, they experimented on children too.
What?
At the Fernald School.
What happened there?
They fed children with intellectual disabilities radioactive oatmeal.
Oatmeal. What oatmeal?
They said it was part of a science club.
Oh my
They
God.
wanted to see how the body absorbed iron.
But they used radioactive iron.
Yeah.
And the parents didn't know.
They didn't give proper informed consent.
This is just unbelievable.
It's a very troubling part of our history.
And then there's all this stuff about the military.
Oh, yes. They exposed hundreds of thousands of military personnel to radiation.
During the nuclear bomb tests.
Yes, they wanted to study the effects of radiation poisoning.
And they just told them to stand there and watch.
In some cases, yes. They had very minimal protection.
This is so messed up.
There were projects like Project 4.1.
What was that?
They studied the people who lived downwind from the test sites.
To see how the radiation affected them?
Yeah.
This is just awful.
It's a very dark chapter in our history.
And speaking of dark chapters, what about Ultra?
Oh, that's another really troubling
It's right,
program.
the CIA, right.
Yeah, they were experimenting with mind control.
LSD, right.
LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation.
And they did this to regular people.
prisoners, mental patients, even just regular civilians.
Without their consent.
In most cases, yes.
And they destroyed a lot of the records, right?
Yeah, which makes it really hard to know the full extent of what they did.
That's so shady.
It's really
It
unsettling.
makes you wonder what they were trying to hide.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just happening here, right?
No, there were the Guatemala syphilis experiments.
Oh, right, in the late 1940s?
The U.S. Public Health Service deliberately infected people with STDs.
Prisoners, soldiers, mental patients.
And they didn't get consent.
That's insane.
It was a huge ethical violation.
And they apologize for it, right?
Yeah, in 2010, the U.S. government issued a formal apology.
It's hard to believe something like that could happen.
It's a reminder that these things can happen anywhere.
And then there's the eugenics movement.
Oh, eugenics. That's a whole other can of worms.
It's basically the idea that you can improve the human race through selective breeding.
Yeah, and it was really popular in the early 20th century.
And not just with, like, fringe groups, right?
No, it was supported by major institutions.
Like who?
The Carnegie Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation.
Wow, I had no idea.
It was seen as a way to solve social problems.
And it led to some pretty awful things, right?
Yeah, like forced sterilization programs.
They were sterilizing people against their will.
Yeah, people who were deemed unfit,
Like who?
people with mental illnesses, disabilities, people who were poor, minorities.
That's terrible.
It was based on the idea that these people were genetically inferior.
And there was a Supreme Court case, right?
Buck v. Bell in 1927.
What
The
happened?
Supreme Court upheld the legality of forced sterilization.
That's crazy.
It allowed states to sterilize people without their consent.
How many people were sterilized?
Over 60,000.
That's just unbelievable.
And the really scary thing is that American eugenics actually influenced the Nazis.
The Nazis?
Yeah, they used American laws as a model for their own racial hygiene policies.
That's chilling.
It shows how dangerous these ideas can be.
So after all of this, after all these horrible things...
There were some positive changes.
Like what?
The Belmont Report in 1979.
What did that do?
It established ethical principles for research involving human subjects.
Like what?
Respect for persons, beneficence, justice.
So treating people with dignity, making sure the research benefits them, being fair.
Exactly.
And now we have institutional review boards, right?
Yes, they review research proposals to make sure they're ethical.
And informed consent is required.
Absolutely. People have to understand the risks and benefits before they participate.
But there's still a lot of mistrust, right?
Oh, yeah, especially in minority communities.
Because of things like Tuskegee.
Exactly.
It's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust.
It will. We need more transparency, more community involvement in research.
So after this deep dive into the dark side of science...
It's important to remember
What?
that science is a powerful tool.
It can be used for good or evil.
And we have to be vigilant.
To make sure it's used ethically.
And to protect the vulnerable.
So what do you think? I mean, after all of this, what are your thoughts?
What makes you wonder about the responsibility of scientists and the institutions that support them?
To make sure this never happens again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about the pursuit of knowledge itself.
Right. Like how far is too far?
What are the limits?
And who gets to decide?
Those are big questions.
They are. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been heavy.
It has.
But it's important.
Absolutely.
And we hope it's given you some things to think about.
Yeah, we all need to be aware of this history.
So we can learn from it.
And build a better future.
Thanks for listening.